Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to our online public exhibition this evening for Shelton Green in Warlingham. You're very welcome, and before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Joseph Baum. Some of you will have already spoken to me, or my colleague Joanna, who is also here this evening. We are here to facilitate this online exhibition. And I appreciate that this might be new to some of you, so I just wanted to spend a few minutes just to explain how this software works. The first thing to say is it's really important that you're able to see as much information as possible this evening. So if you haven't done already, please go into full screen mode. You can do that by clicking the bottom right-hand icon as shown on this slide. The second thing to say is obviously we want you to ask as many questions as you like. Many of you who have already started to send questions to me on email, and I've been trying to do my best to respond to those. But today is a really important opportunity to ask your questions to the team. We will be having a live Q&A later on where our project team will be here live to answer some of those questions. But obviously we won't be able to answer all of them today, and what we're saying is that we will go back to each and every one of you in writing as soon as possible, ideally before the end of next week. So please ask your questions, and you can use the question icon there. And indeed, people have already started to ask questions, so make sure you do that. And then the third thing to say is it's a very hot day outside and you might want to enjoy the sunshine, and that's understandable. And if you want to do that, that's great. And you can download the information on display this evening by clicking on the handout icon on the right-hand side. That gives you access to the exhibition slides that are available this evening, and also the community newsletter that was distributed throughout Warlingham a few weeks ago. And so you can do that now, and you can also share a recording of this presentation. And this presentation is being recorded and it will go onto the website. So if you know anyone who has missed this session, that's okay, it will be on the website. And we've also said to people that we're more than happy to send hard copies of this information in the post for those people who aren't as confident using the internet or don't have access to the internet as well. And the final thing to say is welcome. This is a genuine opportunity for us to talk to you about the proposals before we submit any planning application. I'm shortly going to introduce you to Chartwell. They're a local company. Both directors of Chartwell live in the district, and they really genuinely care about the village of Warlingham. We want to share our vision for Shelton Green, and we've got members of the team who will do that this evening. We also want to share with you what we believe are some really good benefits as part of these proposals. And affordable housing is one of them, but there are many more that we will talk about this evening. And as I said before, we want to answer your questions as well, and please use the software, and please continue to ask questions after this exhibition as well, and you can contact me by email, and the email address is available at the end of this presentation. And the final thing is I'm sure you'd all like to know where we go from here, what the next steps are, and we're going to set out some timescales for you as well. And the very final thing is to introduce the team. They're all here this evening. They're going to put their webcams on later. We've got Martin from Chartwell. We've got Billy, who's supporting Chartwell with the planning side. We've got David from Transport, who deals with transport matters. We've got Steve, who's the master planner, who's dealing with the design of the proposals. And last but not least, we've got myself and Joanna, who are facilitating this and trying to make sure that residents and councillors have a voice in this application. So that is more than enough from me. So I'll now hand over to Martin from Chartwell to explain a bit more about why we're here. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for giving up your Thursday evening to listen to our proposals. It really is much appreciated. The more people involved, the better the scheme can become. So a bit about Chartwell. We are an award-winning privately owned property development company, and we focus on building bespoke homes across Surrey, Sussex and Kent. We originally set up in Whiteleaf a number of years ago, and then moved down to Old Oxted, and now have just crossed the border over to Edenbridge, where our offices are because of expansion. Key directors, including myself, live close proximity to Warlingham, and a number of our staff are from the district of Tandridge. For example, the managing director, Rob Anderson, he has lived in Tandridge his entire life, and his children are members at a number of local sports clubs. They play football and cricket in Oxted, they play hockey in Caterham, and they play rugby in Warlingham. Myself, I've lived my whole life literally 5 minutes away from the village, and I've got a 6-year-old daughter who goes to school within Tandridge, and she absolutely loves coming to the Warlingham Green Family Day that was run at the weekend. So we as a family engage on a number of occasions on a number of local and community and sporting events. In the afternoon on Saturday, I went down to watch AFC Whiteleaf play their first football match, which was exciting with my dad. So, you know, we are already quite an integral part of Warlingham already. So we're not an out-of-towner that have come in trying to swoop and trying to make a quick buck. We see this as something that we are very, very passionate about. We want the right housing for the locals, and something that we can really be proud of as a development company. A bit about our planning history. Chartwell have secured planning for and built a number of apartment and housing schemes within Warlingham already to date, and we've secured in excess of 200 homes within the district since we started the company. A couple of examples of our developments are at the bottom. On the left-hand side there, you've got 8 apartments we built at Gresham Road in Oxted. In the middle, you've got 9 houses we built in Gainsford Place, Crowhurst. And on the bottom right of Park Road, 2 houses in Oxted. But they're just a snapshot of what we build. If you look on our website, chartwellpropertygroup.com, you'll see a number of other projects. Within the last 7 years, we've been closely associated with Warlingham Rugby Football Club, sponsoring their mini junior section, which we're very proud of. And Chartwell, this really is an evening that we really want to engage with the community and hear from locals as to what type of housing you'd like to see, so that the area of Warlingham will thrive for years to come. And thank you again for listening and attending. I'll now pass you to our architect, Steve.
Thanks, Martin. So I'm going to talk about the site location. Hopefully you all know where Warlingham is. In case you don't, Warlingham is the largest and sustainable village in the Tandridge district of Surrey. The site is the former Shelton Sports Club, which was a private sports club that was not open to the public. It's been vacant for over a decade and is currently not publicly accessible, so you can't get onto the site. The site has been a bit of a problem over the last 10 years, and there has been issues with antisocial behaviour, and the building was subject to an arson attack. The site measures 6.06 hectares and is made up of 2 parcels of land. This includes defunct sports pitches, tennis courts and areas of hard standing. To the north, the site is bound by open space agricultural land, residential homes to the east, residential homes, open space, planting and community allotments to the south, open space agricultural land to the west, and the site is generally well enclosed from external views from the countryside to the north. Potential access points include Shelton Close on the eastern boundary and Hilby Road on the southern boundary. The site benefits from a public right-of-way to the north and runs along the edge of the site. This gives access to the countryside and offers an alternative, if somewhat leisurely, route to the Upper Warlingham station through the countryside. The site is also a short walk from Warlingham Village Centre to the east. Next slide, please. So for all of our projects, we want to know that the sites are sustainably located and suitable for new homes. So we have undertaken what we call a facilities audit to understand what is in the local area. Essentially, what you can see here is, and the conclusion is, that the site is sustainably located and benefits from a range of facilities to support a new neighbourhood within easy walking distance, mostly sort of 5 to 10 to 15 minutes, so all within easy walk. Facilities include allotments to the south, Warlingham Village Green and Centre, a 5-minute walk to the east. This includes a food store, post office, general practitioner, and lots of other facilities and shops. There are a number of schools within the local area, like within a 10 to 15-minute walk of the site. Also, Upper Wallingham Station is a 15 to 20-minute walk to the west, with Whiteleaf Station just beyond. Now, there are a number of bus stops within a 5-minute walk along West Hall Road, Linfield Road, and to the south and southeast. So a good range of public transport. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Steve. Just following on from that, I'm going to provide a sort of brief introduction to the site in its current form, and really the rationale that sits behind seeing Shelton Sports Ground as a real opportunity for transformation and to deliver some really significant benefits for local people and for the village of Wallingham more generally. So just reflecting back on what Steve said previously, the sports ground was historically a private sports club. It was privately owned and privately run, and there was no public access other than for members of the club and any guests that they might have brought along. So it wasn't a case of local villagers being able to come up and on a weekend just have a kick around it. It was privately owned and managed in that way. There were several attempts by various different parties to run the club profitably and run it viably as a private business. But unfortunately, all of those failed, and since that time, the site sat vacant for almost a decade now. In that time, it hasn't been actively used for sports, and unfortunately, has become the focus of antisocial behaviour and, as Steve mentioned, previous arson attacks. So it plays a limited role in terms of its benefits and contribution to the village, and there is an opportunity here to take what is an area of land that's been acknowledged by Tandridge District Council as being disused, and turn it into something which the village can be proud of and which really contributes to the future growth and prosperity of Wallingham as a village. As Steve mentioned, the site comprises 2 areas of land, the main one being the former sports club, but also includes an area of land adjacent to a property on Hilbury Road, number 267, which would provide access to the site, and Steve will provide a bit more in due course about the proposals that are emerging. And as Steve said, the site is very well enclosed by mature trees on all boundaries, visually well contained, and the vast majority of those trees and a buffer to them would be retained as part of any development. And just to reflect, as I said before, with that in mind, with the limited benefit and limited contribution of the site in its current form, the sustainable location, and the fact that this has been identified as a draft allocation by Tandridge District Council in the local plan, there is a real opportunity here to make best use of the land, provide much needed housing, much needed affordable housing for the village and for local people, but also to make a real long-term contribution to sports provision, sports re-provision that will contribute to access to sport and also the vibrancy of the village of Wallingham for years to come. Next slide, please, Joseph. And just to give it a little bit of background here in terms of the draft local plan. So I'm sure as many of you will know, Tandridge are in the process of bringing forward a new local plan to set the tone for future growth and future development in the district. That's at a very advanced stage, and it is currently undergoing independent examination by a publicly appointed inspector. The local plan identifies a need for at least 300 homes per year to be delivered across the district as a whole. That's a significantly greater number than was historically identified as being needed, but still is a long way short of what the government identifies as being needed in the district, which is in excess of 600 homes per year. And the local plan identifies a particular need for smaller homes, for young households, first-time buyers, but also for those looking to downsize. As Steve mentioned, Wallingham as a village is identified as a Tier 1 settlement. That's really a reflection of the fact that it's a sustainable location for growth, has access to services, facilities, a wide range of schools, shops, doctor surgeries, but is therefore a focal point for future growth as a result. Shelton Green as a site has been allocated within the draft plan under policy HSG 18. And in doing so, it's identified as a site that will, in time, make a contribution to local housing needs and is necessary to do that moving forward. The council's own evidence identifies the site as being a suitable and sustainable site. The Greenbelt review concludes that the site would have no harm to the Greenbelt, and that the site is effectively an infill and wouldn't cause any harm to the openness of the Greenbelt. And in terms of landscape, the council's evidence identifies this as being one that has no impact on landscape character, and the site has the capacity to accommodate a housing development. And in terms of ecology, again, the council's evidence finds the site is able to accommodate development. There are some sensitivities which we'll reflect on, and Steve will mention in talking about the proposals, but they don't prohibit development on this site. So ultimately, that's the rationale for Tandridge's allocation. In terms of the capacity of the site, the local plan identifies the site as being capable of delivering a minimum of 110 homes, albeit councils put forward more recent evidence as part of that local plan process to the inspector, which identifies that the site has a capacity for over 190 homes, so significantly more than initially thought. And the council's most recent interactions with the inspector, they make very clear that the numbers quoted in the local plan are minimum figures. They're not intended to be a cap or a limit, and it's really about delivering a scheme that fits appropriately with the local area. And certainly, as Steve will talk about in more detail, Chartwell's proposals for approximately 150 homes sit very comfortably within that range of the local plan number and the more recent evidence of a much higher capacity. Thank you. Next slide, Joseph.
Thanks, Billy. So the emerging proposals, it's important to remember we're preparing an outline application with all matters reserved aside from access and the amount of homes we're seeking permission for. So this is not a full planning application that talks about detailed architecture or the layout. That will come in subsequent planning applications. And should we be successful with the outline planning application, our team will come back and talk to you about the architectural style, the materials, the detailed layout of how this thing's going to work with inside some of the shapes that you can see here. So here's what we call the draft parameters plan, and this is one of the key planning drawings that we're going to submit, subject to any amendments coming out of engagement. And the illustrative master plan, you may have seen, is illustrative and shows one way development could come forward inside the parameters set out here. The parameters plan shows what we're asking for planning permission, and the parameter plans, then the parameters include areas of strategic open space, and these are shown in green. And it's worth pointing out about a third of the site is made up of green infrastructure, and it might be trees, drainage, public open spaces, and general landscaping. And this results in an increase in biodiversity over what's currently there. So actually, it's a good thing for wildlife. There'll be a biodiversity increase. Development coverage is shown in the light yellow, kind of tan color. And as Billy said, circa 150 homes to be confirmed. And this is a mix of smaller homes, we feel. We're still testing heights, but the average building height will predominantly be 2.5 story, we think. Housing mix is again subject to further engagement and depending what comes out of this event as well. So all your feedback's very important. However, we do think that 2/3 of homes will be 2- and 3-bed houses, suitable for downsizing and maintaining those all-important social networks in the village. Just so as people get older, need to downsize, there are properties within the village that they can move to. And this is an issue currently within the village, and this is also identified by the local plan. There are some larger homes, but just a few. I don't think we're looking at any 5-bedders at the moment. So there are some 4 beds, and then there's some flats as well. But as I say, we're still working on the mix. The main access is to the south, which you can see from the arrow, and that's from Hilby Road. I mentioned Shelton Close earlier on the east site, which is the orange arrow. And this is going to be emergency access and also for pedestrian and cyclists too, so they can walk and cycle to the village centre sustainably. We also include a children's play area. That's the pink star in the middle. We've also got a drainage feature, so a pond that will sustainably deal with surface water drainage, and that's the light blue star at the top of your drawing. And also a foul water pumping station. This is a dark blue star, and that's something you won't really see. It's underground, just pumps water. Finally, the dark green line that encircles the site is a trim trail, And this is there to encourage sort of healthy lifestyles, exercise, maybe gym and play equipment along it, but it's really to try and get people active out there and walking. As Billy, I think, touched upon already, our scheme also includes improvements to sports facilities elsewhere in the village. Next slide, please. So here's the indicative master plan. As I say, the parameter plans, which is shown you, is the planning drawing that we're asking permission for. That's what it's based on. The indicative master plan shows you one way housing could come forward inside those development parameters. So here we are at the moment. This is the current thinking. And this, as I say, this is useful to explain our current design thinking, but we're still engaging as we go. So subject to further consultation with the community at the reserve matter stage, we will come back, as I say, and talk to you about the detailed layout, mix of homes, architecture, and basically what it looks like. So again, I just must emphasize, this is an outline planning application. We're not getting into the detailed layout of the internals of the site or what it looks like architecturally. It's more about the principles, so access and the amount and development coverage. So looking at the site, our design strategies include respecting the local character of Warlingham, which is terribly important. It needs to fit in with its surrounding context. So really, that's about providing a mixture of detached, semi-detached, and some terraced houses, which is what the prevailing character of the local area, and reflecting sort of landscape character and public open spaces. And this is something we'll explore in one of the documents we're going to submit for planning, called a design and access statement, how we understand the village and how that's interpreted in our designs. We would retain and complete the existing perimeter planting, Billy mentioned earlier, and that's really for the benefit of flora and fauna, essentially, wildlife. And as Billy says, this helps to mitigate external views from the countryside and public rights of way and through to the scheme. We would create an ecological landscape buffer to the west and north to accommodate existing tree planting, provide a soft edge to the countryside, enhanced biodiversity over what's currently there through the creation of new habitat, deal with surface water drainage through the creation of a drainage pond. We'd also connect together existing green infrastructure assets through the creation of a north-south landscape corridor through the site. We'd also create a new heart to the neighbourhood through the creation of a village green at the heart. We'd also create a network of pedestrian-friendly streets to encourage walking and cycling. And I mentioned the trim trail already to encourage exercise. And also, I think our scheme really benefits the surrounding community by connecting the neighbourhood to the south around Hilbury Road to the countryside to the north, giving them access to the countryside that they currently don't have. As I say, the majority of houses are detached, semi-detached, or in small terraces. Again, 1/3 of houses are smaller 2- and 3-bed houses to allow for downsizing, maintaining social networks in the village. Next slide, please.
Hi there, good evening. I'm going to talk through the transport and access arrangements in a bit more detail. As Steve's just explained, primary access to the site for vehicles will be via Hilbury Road to the south. We spent some time ensuring that the access arrangements work and are suitable for the quantum of development that's being proposed. So we've reviewed traffic flow, vehicle speeds to ensure that the junction works in accordance with all appropriate design criteria. In designing the junction, we've ensured it's suitable for all users, so vehicles, residents, refuse vehicles, for example, HGVs and the like, as well as pedestrians and cyclists. Secondary access will be onto Shelton Close, which would primarily be for emergency access, as well as for pedestrians and cyclists to access the amenities within the village to the east. And that creates a key link, which would be accessible to non-residents passing through the site as well. The assessment that we've carried out looks at the local network. So we've assessed the access junction in capacity terms to ensure that it works. There'll be no impact on the free flow of traffic along Hilbury Road. We've looked at the assessment, assessed the development off-site to try and understand what the impacts will be on wider capacity. That includes the M25 junction 6, which is a key area to assess the impact of. The development itself of 150 residential units, which is what's indicatively proposed, would generate in the order of 86 movements in the morning peak hour, 72 movements in the evening peak hour. Now that roughly translates in the morning peak hour to 3 vehicular trips every 2 minutes. So that assessment, which is based on data that we've collected, has been used to understand what that impact on the wider network will be. The assessment of the M25 would show that actually trips dissipate on the network. So some travel to other destinations that are nearby, be that Croydon or other destinations such as Redhill, Reigate, and we've assessed those and assessed the impact that would have on the wider network, particularly Junction 6, as I say. In terms of improvements, we have looked at not only the junction but also pedestrian improvements. So we're introducing a crossing on Hilbury Road to ensure that pedestrians have safe access to the wider network. The link through the site will provide a key link, whereas at the moment there are footpaths on through fields that can link you to the stations to the west, for example, but our route will provide a safer and more direct route, which will also provide access perhaps in the evening when routes through a field may be less desirable. In terms of car parking, we're providing parking in accordance with Cambridge District Council's parking standards. Now those standards do allow for a variety of different types, number of parking spaces dependent on the quantum of development. And for development of this size, 150 units with the indicative split of housing, we'd be looking at just shy of 300 parking spaces. Obviously, we'll ensure that we've got the right amount of parking to serve the quantum of development and mix of development that's proposed. And it's worth noting that car ownership within Tandridge is 1.57. So car ownership is actually less than 2 cars per unit. Mode of travel is actually quite high for non-car modes. So car modes make up around 60% of trips within the immediate surrounding area. Trips by train actually make up 26%, so just over a quarter of trips are by train. So we will be looking to try and encourage non-car modes. Measures we can do that, such as a travel plan to encourage people to stop using their car, maybe use alternative modes such as a bus within the village centre, rail links as I suggested. Other options include a car club, which we could include within the site. So a new car club could provide residents with alternative means of using a car without needing to own the car themselves. And we're working with Surrey County Council to make sure that our mitigation package works and is suitable to meet the needs of the development and ultimately encourage sustainable travel where we can. Chartwell will work with Surrey, as will we, to make sure that mitigation package is designed to, to cater for the needs of the development. On to the next slide.
Thank you, David. I'm just going to follow up from David's discussion on access and transport and just focus on sports provision for a short while. As I've said before, Shelton Sports Ground was previously a private sports club. It hasn't been actively used for sport for over a decade. It's been vacant in that period, having failed to be a sort of viable private sports club. Nevertheless, because there was a historic sports use, the draft local plan policy for the site in Tandridge's local plan requires that any development on the site makes a contribution to re-providing sports in the local area. And certainly that's something that Chartwell are very much keen to deliver on that requirement, and in doing so deliver a lasting benefit to sports provision and access to sport for the village and for the local community. And I think it's reflecting the fact that the unfortunate history of this site being an unsuccessful private sports club. What Chartwell really want to do is have something that will have a real lasting and long-term benefit in terms of sport provision and be managed and used for significant benefit locally. In terms of the approach to identifying how best to re-provide sports and how best to meet local sports need, that's really been guided by the council's playing pitch strategy. And what that does is it assesses the various needs of different sports for new pitches and for new space to accommodate growth in participation and also growth in the population. And within Warlingham in particular, the playing pitch strategy identifies a particular shortfall in rugby provision and issues of pitches being overplayed, so not enough pitches for the number of teams and the number of games that are being played. I think it's also worth reflecting at this stage is the local plan identifies several other sites for development in Warlingham, including some of the other private sports clubs and sports clubs in the village. So those sites will also provide opportunities for meeting the needs of other sports. So it's about looking at this in the round. And I think what Chartwell have sought to do here is, from the playing pitch strategy, identify what is the most significant shortfall and what is the most significant need, and really focus on delivering that. And the other sites can then address needs relating to football, for example, or cricket or any other outdoor sport. Next slide, please, Joseph. In terms of how Chartwell are seeking to do that, the emerging proposals for sports provision focus around working with Warlingham Rugby Football Club. The football club are a really established club, over 2,000 members, a key part of the village, but also, as well as being a rugby club, they support a range of sports, including netball and cricket, and a range of local events and activities. So Chartwell saw the rugby club as a real opportunity to be a focal point, someone they could work with to address the requirement for sports provision that arises from redeveloping this site, but also a club that is capable of really benefiting the local community even more with investment and with the support of Chartwell through this development. The proposal itself, obviously on site, as Steve mentioned, includes open space and it includes play facilities that will provide a range of informal sport and recreation opportunities. But in addition to that, in terms of formal sports provision and in terms of providing pitches and opportunities for people to get out and play rugby or football or whatever it is, what Chartwell are proposing to do, having worked with Warlingham Rugby Football Club, is really threefold. The first is an intention to gift the rugby club approximately 3 hectares of additional land for providing new junior pitches, just being highlighted now on the screen and outlined in red. So that's an area of land which Chartwell own, which is directly adjacent to the club's existing pitches, and it is suitable for providing growth of junior sports and junior rugby, and really supporting the club in delivering sports to children and young people in the village. The other benefit of doing this is, at the moment, the club has a pre-arranged agreement with Warlingham School to use some off-site pitches on the opposite side of Tyve Shore Lane. That requires parents, children to cross that relatively busy road on the days they're using it. And obviously there's a risk associated with that in terms of safety of groups of children and the parents. So what provision of new pitches and land for new pitches directly adjacent to the club does is enables it to run more safely, more efficiently, and support growing popularity of rugby amongst young people and children in the village. The second part of the solution that Chartwell have developed in working with Warlingham Rugby Football Club is that Chartwell would fund the installation of new drainage to a number of existing pitches at the club, and some of the existing pitches suffer from waterlogging due to soil conditions and ground conditions, and unfortunately what that means is they can't be used or they can only be used very, very lightly at times. So by installing new drainage, it will improve the playability of those pitches, improve the number of times and frequency that they can be played, and hopefully reduce the amount of downtime and postponements that arise because of weather conditions and waterlogging of pitches. And the final limb, if you like, to Chartwell's emerging proposals with the Rugby Football Club are that they will support and fund the refurbishment of a part of the clubhouse to provide dedicated female changing facilities. And that's really a reflection of the fact that there is a significant and continued growth in the popularity of girls and women's rugby at the club. really strong support for new teams of rugby, but at the moment that they don't have the facilities on site, certainly not in a dedicated format, to provide female changing. So this will really kind of level the playing field, if you like, with men's and women's rugby, and support the future growth of women's rugby at the club. So that's really the package of measures, in addition to on-site sports and open space. That's the package of measures that Chartwell have developed, working very closely with the Rugby Football Club, and which in time they hope to take to the Rugby Football Union and Sports England to get their support for that package as well. And as I say, it is about meeting the needs of the playing pitch strategy. It is about meeting the specific needs and challenges that Warlingham Rugby Football Club face, but in doing so, it should deliver a lasting and long-term benefit to access to sports for everybody in the village. So certainly compared to the existing inactive site, it's a significant step forward and hopefully a significant benefit for the community at large. Next slide, please, Joseph. And I think this slide is really just a reflection of the work that Chartwell have been doing with the Rugby Football Club. I think as a project team, we're really pleased to have the support of the president of the club and many of its members to the proposals, and particularly to the investment and positive benefits that will mean for their facilities moving forward. And I think it's a testament to the benefits that Chartwell's proposals for reprovision would have, not only for the club as a very important member of the community, but also for residents of the village and the community of Warlingham at large. Thank you, Joseph. Just finally from me to sum up and sort of draw a few strands together as to what are the benefits of the proposals that Chartwell have for Shelton Green. Obviously the first, as Steve mentioned, the proposals are for approximately 150 new homes. Of those, 40% will be designated as affordable housing. So that's 60 of those homes will be defined as affordable housing, protected as affordable housing into perpetuity, and that percentage exceeds the current local plan requirements for Tandridge. So the current requirements are about just under 35%. So it's approximately 10 additional affordable housing units as a result of Chartwell's proposals over and above what the local plan requires. As Steve mentioned, in terms of mix, reflecting what the emerging local plan seeks, it really is a focus on delivering smaller homes, 1, 2 and 3 bedroom units to help young people to get on the housing ladder, help first-time buyers in the village to stay in the village and find their first home in the village. An opportunity for small families to continue to grow and stay within the village, but also for older residents who may have a large home in a village, would love to stay within the community, an opportunity for them to downsize but remain within what is a lovely village. Also, as Steve mentioned, significant areas of new open space within the scheme, providing opportunities for recreation, seeking to improve the wildlife habitat, and the scheme also will deliver a biodiversity net gain, so a real positive for local nature, flora, fauna, for wildlife. As I've just touched on, a key part of the proposals are about supporting local sports through that provision, and working with Warlingham Rugby Football Club to provide new pitches, improve their facilities, and just generally improve the playability of their existing facilities for the benefits of members of the club and for the wider community in terms of access to sport. And finally, obviously, we very much recognise that with new development comes a concern about pressure on local infrastructure, and can roads, can schools, and can healthcare cope and support that new development. As part of the proposals, Chartwell will make significant contributions towards local infrastructure. We anticipate that the contributions will be in the order of £1.4 to £1.5 million through the community infrastructure levy alone. That will go to Tandridge as a district council, who can then decide how that's best spent to meet local needs. So what roads need improving, what schools need expanding, and supporting local health providers in ensuring that there are enough doctors' surgery spaces to support those new homes, so that existing residents aren't disbenefited by the proposals, and so that new residents have access to the infrastructure and the services that they need. Thank you, Joseph. Next slide, please.
Thank you very much, Billy. Yes, so if everybody can just turn their webcams on, please. So this is the opportunity for residents to ask their questions, and I will sort of read those out for you. And yeah, that's we will take those forward. If everyone can give a little wave first of all, just so that we know that you exist and you're real. Fantastic. So yeah, I will ask the first question. I think first of all, just a point of clarification, Billy, on the sports provision and for the land we're gifting to the rugby club. I believe it's 3 acres, not 3 hectares. Is that
correct? Yes, it's 3 acres, just sufficient to provide 2 junior pitches and the land that requires around.
Okay, fantastic. We have a question from a number of residents that I think I might start with, if that's okay. This comes from where we've got Sarah, Chrissy, Hugh, who are all asking about affordable housing, quite rightly. Perhaps, Billy, you can clarify, just remind us that the percentage of affordable housing on this site is, you mentioned that's in excess of the local council's policy. Can you just sort of flesh that out? And also, what do we mean by affordable? Because I think residents would probably want to know, you know, what that actually means in practice, and if there's an opportunity for many of these local residents to benefit from the local housing as well.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. So just to clarify, the percentage of affordable housing that Chartwell are proposing here is 40%. So of the 150 units, 60 of them will be designated as affordable housing. That exceeds the current local plan requirements, which are for 34%. So only, you know, just about 50 homes would be provided as affordable if Chartwell solely met local plan requirements. But that's not what they're proposing to do. They very much recognise that there's a significant need for affordable housing. I think Tandridge's own housing strategy identifies a need for almost 200 units of affordable housing per year. And in recognition of that, Chartwell really do want to go above and beyond. So they're proposing 40% affordable housing here. In terms of what affordable housing is, it's defined by government. It's effectively an umbrella term. It's a range of different types of housing that are designed to give people who cannot afford market housing an opportunity to get on the housing ladder in some way, shape or form. And it's a subsidised form of housing. It can either be for rent, so products such as affordable rent, or it can be for sale, and that could be products such as first homes or shared ownership products. In terms of what levels and prices they will be at, it's difficult at this stage to give precise figures because ultimately that's determined by effectively market housing prices at the time that they are sold. But generally speaking, an affordable rent house will rent at 80% of the market rent, so there's a 20% reduction to help give people that leg up and make products more affordable. Products such as first homes, which are homes for sale, are discounted by 30% from the market value. So someone buying that would be buying it effectively 70% of what it would be on the open market. So they are a significant assistance, quite rightly, for those that don't have the incomes to afford market housing, and hopefully a real benefit for local people. In terms of how they're allocated, that's generally done by the local council working in conjunction with housing associations, and the local council holds a housing register of people who are in need, and people who have a local connection. They generally have local connection criteria. So it really is residents of Warlingham and residents of the wider districts of Tandridge and surrounding villages that will benefit from those affordable homes. It's not, you know, people coming from outside.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Martin, but obviously we want local people to benefit from Shelton Green, don't we? We want them to access those homes and to get that opportunity.
That's right. That's what this is all about, really, making sure that we're getting all the feedback in from everyone locally now. So we are building and almost future-proofing Warlingham so that it will thrive for years to come.
Just in terms of another detailed question that quite a few residents were asking about is the housing mix. And Steve, I note that you sort of touched on it with the 2 and the 3-bed houses. Does Chartwell and do the team have a sort of breakdown at this stage of what that would look like? And I suppose for those looking to downsize, is there flexibility in these proposals so that we can sort of look at potentially bungalows and more 2-beds? What's the current breakdown, and is there flexibility in how that sort of works as we get closer to submitting a planning application?
Shall I take this one, Martin? I mean, I'll leave the bungalow question to you because you're going to be the person building this. But as I said in the presentation, it's a smaller housing mix, mostly 2 and 3-bed houses, 2/3 of that, and that's in line with the local plan and also local housing need. And again, that's a mixture of some detached, mostly some detached, and some terraces of houses and a few flats. And as I said, I don't think there's any 5-bed units we're looking at the moment. There are some 4-bed units, but yeah, this is still something we're looking at, and it's still a part of really engaging with people, various stakeholders, including the community, to decide quite what we're going to do. But on the bungalow issue, I'll probably just hand over to Martin on that.
Yeah, if that's what the demand is, then that's certainly what we'll look at producing. So any feedback, if there are people out there that really feel there is a lack of bungalows in the area, I know the area, I drive up and down Lipsford Road twice a day on the way to school drop off and back, and there are a number of bungalows, but we're more than happy to provide more.
Okay, thanks for the clarification and knowing that there is that flexibility. Something that jumps out to me and also to a few other residents who are asking questions is just on this car club. David, if you could clarify sort of what are we talking about, and how can it work in a village like Warlingham, and how would it work, and what are we proposing really here with this car club?
Yes, absolutely. So a car club is a car essentially that's placed typically on a highway, that's managed by an external company. So you've probably heard of Enterprise, Zipcar, who are 2 of the bigger brand names. And essentially they would place a car, and residents can obtain membership for use of that car. And as part of the development, if we're providing a car club, typically residents would have free membership for potentially a year to use that car. And you'd book a time slot online, can use that car for shopping, food shopping if that's what you wish to do, or for longer journeys. And there'll be a small cost, not only for membership, but also for the number of miles that you use. And essentially, it's a mechanism for providing residents with access to a car for occasional needs. And if, for example, you own 2 cars, but you only really need use of 1 car on a regular basis, you may find that you don't need to actually own a second car if you can use a car club bay. And it's not just for residents. So a vehicle is typically placed on the highway so that others can use it. So in the development, it may be in the development site, but residents in the surrounding area can make use of that. And that obviously increases the viability of the car club in the first place. So essentially, it's a tool for ensuring that residents can have, and non-residents can have access to a car when they need to. There is evidence to show that placing a car club vehicle can have a knock-on effect in reducing general car ownership in the surrounding area.
Thanks, David. I've got a question for Billy, if that's okay, who's just a point of fact and clarification. A resident, I can't remember their name, apologies, was asking about potential contamination on site, and also what the site that we're looking to gift to the rugby club, what's that current use on that particular site? Is that a redundant piece of land as well as what's being proposed at Shelton Green? If you could just clarify those points, I think that'd be really helpful.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So in terms of contamination, we are not aware of any significant issues with contamination. Chartwell will, in the course of bringing any development forward, carry out appropriate soil investigations, and if there are issues, will of course deal with those. But certainly there is nothing that the project team are aware of that is prohibitive for development. And obviously, I think a reflection of that is the fact that the council itself is allocating it for development. So if there was a significant contamination risk or a contamination issue for future residents, that certainly wouldn't be a draft allocation. In terms of that additional land for the junior pitches, it's currently just scrubland, so it's overgrown land. It doesn't have a particular use. It's not actively farmed. It is just an area of scrubland. So there is opportunity to put that to very good use in providing those additional junior pitches. And just to follow on from that, Chartwell, again, in the course of their due diligence in bringing this proposal forward, have carried out surveys on that in terms of ecology, just to make sure that the use of those that land for pitches wouldn't conflict with nature conservation or any other issues such as that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Billy. And just one more question for you, if I may. You sort of answered it on the previous slide when you talked about, in addition to the sports provision, the commitment to local infrastructure. Could you just clarify that figure and sort of what guarantee is there that investment in the village will go to the village? Is there a percentage that goes to the local parish council? How does that work so that residents are aware of what our commitments are?
Yeah, no problem. So the main mechanism for this, any development on Shelton Green making a contribution towards infrastructure is through something called the Community Infrastructure Levy. And that's effectively a fund for infrastructure that's paid into by developers. And then the district council, working with the parish council, decides how that's best spent in order to address needs for infrastructure and make sure the doctor surgeries and the schools and the like are able to cope with not only the additional homes from Shelton Green, but any future other developments in Warlingham. In terms of that levy, we anticipate at this stage, based on the sort of schemes that Chartwell are developing, that the contributions would be somewhere in the region of 1.4 to 1.5 million pounds. So a really significant sum to contribute to, in making those improvements. Of that amount, not only is the district council responsible for choosing how it's best spent, and obviously we'll do that with the benefits and the needs of its residents in mind, but also a specific proportion, 15% of that, goes to a Warlingham Parish Council, so that they can choose how best to spend that on specific local projects. So there is absolute certainty that a really important proportion of it goes towards specific local projects, but also the district council, in my experience, will use that money very wisely to fund local infrastructure improvements. So if this development and others in Warlingham identified a need for new doctor surgery places, they would work with the local health providers and the clinical commissioning groups to provide that additional capacity, those new doctors consulting rooms, and make sure the place is available. So yeah, I think it's within the gift of the parish council and the district council to make sure those needs are well met, based on the contributions that Chartwell will be making.
Thank you very much. And a final question to Steve, if that's okay. It's an interesting question from Hugh, sorry. And I've always wondered this. How high is 2.5 stories, and what is 2.5 stories, and what does it look like in practice?
Yeah, as I was presenting, I actually thought no one's going to know what I'm talking about, so it's kind of an industry thing, so I apologise for that. But if you imagine it as a 2-story house with accommodation in the roof, so you may have like a window in the roof, like a dormer window, or velux and that type of thing. So it tends to be a metre or so higher than a 2-story house, but not much more. They generally look like 2-story houses with windows in the roof, really, and you see many of those around the village. So yeah, sorry for the industry speak.
Great. And in terms of height, I suppose is what the residents ask. Is there a sort of a typical height for a 2.5 story?
As I say, it's just a metre taller than a resident, a usual kind of 2-storey house. So it could be, I'd have to check back on what the parameters plans may be, but it could be up to sort of 9 or 10 metres, that sort of height. So really, in keeping with the local area, it's nothing that would look out of place really in terms of heights.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's worth saying, first of all, thank you to the team. Please take your webcams off. That'd be very grateful so that my internet can survive. And I suppose the other thing to say is thank you to all of you for asking your questions. For those that we weren't able to tackle today, my colleague and I will go through all of the questions, and the team, when we've got time over the next few days, will be responding to those as well. And for those asking, is this exhibition recorded? It is, and we will be putting a recording of this exhibition on the website, and we will also be circulating this to all of you first thing tomorrow morning. And I suppose that the most important thing, or one of the most important things that you come away knowing this evening, is where we go from here. So we've got the public consultation event tonight. We would then like you to send through your feedback as soon as possible. We've set a deadline there of the 23rd of September. We would then look to only then submit the planning application once we know what your feedback is, and we've tried to adapt the proposals as much as possible. And as Martin was saying, we can look at the mix as well as an example of how we change that. We then would anticipate a determination by the local council, that's Tandridge District Council, by the summer of next year. And all being well, and if Chartwell is successful, then construction would start in early 2023. But as others have said, this is an outline application, and there will be multiple opportunities to engage in the process, and this isn't the only time that we will be consulting with you. And the final thing to say is, one of the first things that I said is that we want your feedback. Many of you have already submitted feedback in the post, which I'm very grateful for. You've also got the online form, which is available on the website, which you can fill in and send through, and that comes straight to me. Or you can fill in a survey, which I'm going to send to all of you when I end this exhibition. And that's exactly the same survey and form that's on the other bits of feedback that you already have. And in the meantime, as I said, myself and Joanna, I've put my email address on here, but myself and Joanna are very happy to talk to you and to respond, to come back with any points of clarification. You can do that on the phone as well for those people who don't have access to the internet. And the final thing to say is a big thank you. Thank you for giving up your evening. Thank you to the team for being here. And if you have any questions, then please get in touch. And please, if you haven't done so already, fill in the survey. So thank you very much and have a very good evening. Take care.